Hi, I'm the Paper Patriot, and today we are making the torso of Goku, starting right where we left off last time in episode 9. So you should already have this much done, most importantly the next section, since that will be the starting point of the upper body. Let's go. If you want your character to crunch, make a waist joint. Exactly like I showed in episode 3, the T-joint tutorial. Every single joint is made the same way, it's how they connect to each other that varies. Now we are going to attach the waist joint to the neck and shoulder area. The piece of card around the waist joint is at a length where I want it to meet the neck area. So roll a couple of tubes of paper about 2 centimeters long, then grab a couple of strips of card and stick some double-sided tape to one of the sides and wrap them around the shoulder area. Then put some glue in the gaps here and slot these tubes of paper inside the gaps, folding those strips of card tightly around the tube. And with the double-sided tape, it should stick pretty firmly. Cut off any of the excess card and add more glue to every little gap you can find, really bonding the card and the paper together. This is all an intuitive process, and there's going to be problems you can't foresee that you're going to have to figure out for yourself. You see, normally I'd like to use the outside of the card piece here to slot neatly in between these two pillars that are attaching to the next section. But as you can see, it doesn't line up smoothly. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to make a cut down the center of these pillars and slot each of the sides of the card in between the pillars so everything stays pretty centered. And then I'm going to add a heap of glue to all the gaps to make it really solid. And this will keep Goku's waist nice and narrow, just like I want it to be. But even now you can see the bottom of these pillars are hitting against the waist joint, adding a few unwanted millimeters to the length of Goku's torso. So I'm going to trim these pillars down even further so it sits even closer to the waist joint, making the torso just that little bit shorter. And this isn't something I've really had to do for any other model so far. I'm just doing what I think is best along the way to fill my vision for the character. Then of course, add more glue to every gap you can find, because the glue is really what is going to make the paper so solid. And after all the glue has been dried, it's time to test if the torso is strong enough. And all that means is I want to be able to crunch the torso from the character without the pillars in his midsection bending or breaking. And I'm happy with it, that's strong enough, even though you're probably going to be grabbing him from the waist joint anyway, so that's really good. But just to make sure, I will wrap yet another piece of card around the waist section, adding even more glue to the gaps. Here I'm just checking to make sure the proportions line up with my illustration, and it's looking good so far. Now, the final step is to buff up the abdomen a little bit, to make his stomach stick out more and add some extra depth to his torso. And what I have here is I have this piece of card, which is basically just 2 lines curving away from each other. And so when you fold this together and make those gaps meet, you will get this arch shape, representing the rib cage basically. And that piece is going to be stuck onto the body with some glue and sticky tape to give the general structure of the torso. To clean it up a little bit, you may need to cut any excess parts of the card here that are covering the shoulder slots or hindering the neck, like I've done so here. The abs are easy, don't make it more complicated than it needs to be. All you do is you break the 6-pack abs up into sections of 2. Draw them flat, a couple of millimeters larger than you want them to be when they fold together, because they will become a little bit narrower as you cut the paper and fold it back. Then make 2 or 3 little cuts in the paper to fold together, making them pop out a little bit, giving that 3D shape. I usually do one rough copy just in case I make any mistakes to make sure it all lines up properly, but honestly this really isn't necessary. It's just me overcomplicating it. Then of course add the color and line work to your final copy before sticking it onto the model. For Goku's skin tone, I'm using E00 and E13 in the Copic markers. And you can see that I'm coloring it exactly the same way I already colored my illustration of Goku that I'm using as my blueprint. I think it's critical to have a full body drawing of the character you are making, because the goal here is to bring the drawing to life, to add that extra dimension to it. As much as I call these paper models, in my mind they're really just 3D drawings. So a huge part of how your model looks is going to depend on how skilled you are at drawing. Don't worry, your drawing ability is what it is. Just make sure that it's better next week or next month than it is today. As long as you are progressing, you are a good drawer. The only comparison you should ever make is to yourself. That's the only person you have to compete against. Anyway, for the rest of the abs, I did the exact same thing. Oh, but the cool thing I started with the articulation is I stuck the lower abs onto the actual waist joint, while the upper abs aren't connected to the lower abs at all. Instead, they are connected or glued to the main body frame. I only figured this out a couple months ago, and it is such a cool idea because now what this means is the models can crunch further without having any paper covering the joint in the way and without looking any uglier. And this also kind of represents the abs contracting as the torso crunches forward. Then for the side of the torso, it's really just going to be a flat piece of paper with a couple of extra cuts to round it out a little bit, and I've also got a couple curves here so it does neatly fit around the main 4-pack abs Goku has here, and then it'll wrap around towards the lower back. And the uppermost layer of Goku's abs is actually this really long piece that sort of wraps around the side. So what I've done here is I just have the shape here drawn flat, and I've just made a lot of very small cuts along the way to just get that curve that I want. And then I colored it in, and you can see I made it so it lines up nicely with his upper abs when being glued to the torso. And the upper oblique muscles are just drawn the way they appear in my drawing again. They're just going to stick around the side of the body here like this. And now moving on to the chest, you can see it looks like this when it's flat. Really all it is it has this upper section here is drawn how you want the chest to appear from the front. And then you have this flat piece here on the side that will actually bend down and tuck under, forming the bottom plane of the chest, making the muscle pop and stick out. And also, as you can see on my template here, I do have a few other smaller cuts that are going to be folded together just to round out the shape a little bit further. Alright, and before you fold it together and color it in, make sure you flip it over first and trace it onto another good copy piece of paper because the shape is symmetrical, so it's going to be a lot easier just tracing the template you already have instead of making it again. And once it's all folded together, this is what it looks like. You will also be able to see that I have a little curve on the side here, and that's because that's where the deltoid is going to be fitting in. Nice. So you can see that it lines up perfectly on the model, exactly the way I wanted it to. I actually did spend 2 hours just getting this shape correct. It is very difficult. And that is it. That is my tutorial showing you how I make the muscles of the torso. The main thing I want you to take away from this video is seeing how I do things and the basic principles I use in creating 3D shapes with paper. I don't want people to be watching this video expecting to make a paper model exactly like mine. That's not the goal here. The goal here is for you to just do the best you can with what you have and improve every single time. Thanks for watching, everyone. I really appreciate your time. And comment below what you think and what you want to make, whether it's with paper or not. I really do want to hear what everyone has to say. Until next time, bye.